At my husband's funeral, my son whispered, "Everything's ours now." He thought grief made me weak. He was wrong. My name is Nora Ellison, and on the morning I buried my husband, I wrapped his scarlet scarf around my shoulders. Not because it was cold, it was late September, and the Maine coast was still carrying summer's warmth, but because Sam had worn that scarf every winter when he walked the pier. And because I knew the sight of me standing there in bright red against the gray sky would do two things at once: remind everyone that I was still here, still breathing, and quietly unsettle my son Tyler and his wife Kelsey, who had spent years treating me like the final hurdle between them and what Sam built. People whispered, of course, why red at a funeral? But I didn't choose it for them. I chose it for Sam. He always said red made me look alive, and on that day I needed to feel more alive than broken. Grief doesn't always hollow you out. Sometimes, if you pay attention, it sharpens you into something people didn't see coming. The chapel smelled of lilies and seawater, the scent of flowers struggling to mask salt carried in from the harbor. I shook hands with old friends from the school where I counseled teenagers for 30 years, hugged former employees from Ellison Modular, the company Sam had built from scratch. Everyone said the same thing: he left quite a legacy. They meant it kindly, but the words landed heavy. Legacy is what men leave behind. Burden is what the widows carry after. At the back of the chapel, Tyler and Kelsey stood too close like conspirators. Tyler tall and restless in a suit that looked borrowed from ambition. Kelsey perfectly put together in a black dress that photographed well her phone tucked under a hymnal. They didn't see me watching as she leaned into his ear lips, curling with something that wasn't grief. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the tone plotting. Always plotting. After the service, when mourners drifted toward the fellowship hall for coffee and pie, I lingered near the casket one last time. That was when Lila Chen, Sam's attorney, and an old friend pressed a slim blue folder into my hand. Her expression was as composed as ever, but her eyes said, "Wait." The label on the front was simple: Open Tuesday. I slipped it under my scarf, next to my heart. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew enough to realize it was not for Tyler's eyes. By the time I walked into the reception, the whispers had shifted. Someone had already seen Tyler speaking with a banker. Someone else mentioned Kelsey arranging a realtor's visit to my house just to get an idea of the value. My house. The cedar shingle home where Sam and I raised Tyler, where we painted the porch swing together one July afternoon, red paint dripping on our shoes. Now it seemed my own son was already measuring it for liquidation. I smiled and poured coffee for the neighbors every inch the gracious widow. But inside, I was taking notes. Sam used to say the most dangerous person in the room is the one who listens more than she talks, and I listened. Before I tell you what was really inside that blue folder, and trust me, it turned my whole world upside down. Let me pause right here. If you're already hooked, if you can feel the tension in your chest wondering how a scarf, a folder, and a son's whisper could lead to the kind of storm that tears a family apart, hit that like button. Don't just ghost through this story. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens when the balance of power flips in a way no one expected. And drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family, treated like you were too fragile to understand what was really going on? Because that's exactly what Tyler thought about me, and he was about to learn how wrong he was. The reception stretched long into the evening. I stood by the dessert table, nodding through condolences, while Tyler and Kelsey circled the room like seagulls eyeing a fish. They thought I couldn't see the way they spoke to each other in half sentences and raised brows. They thought I didn't notice the banker slipping them a card, or the way Kelsey's smile sharpened when someone said inheritance. But I noticed everything, and as I fingered the edge of that hidden blue folder, I knew Sam had left me more than memories. He'd left me a plan. The first crack in the facade came sooner than I expected. 2 nights after the funeral, the house was still full of casseroles and condolences. My kitchen counter looked like a church potluck, tinfoil trays stacked 3 high, neighbors thinking food could keep grief from clawing at me. I barely touched any of it. Instead, I found myself sitting at the dining table with Sam's old mug, sipping lukewarm coffee, staring at the blue folder that still sat unopened in the drawer. That was when I heard Tyler's voice. Loud, careless, traveling down the hallway from my husband's study, the room Sam had always kept locked unless he was working. "Babe, this is it," Tyler said. "Dad's files are all here." He wasn't nearly as organized as he pretended. I froze. Sam's study had been my sanctuary, too. I'd spent years watching him draft plans at that oak desk, the one we bought from a secondhand shop, when he was still dreaming about starting Ellison Modular. That desk was sacred. And now, my son was rifling through it like a burglar. I stood in the doorway before they noticed me. Kelsey was perched on the desk, scrolling through Sam's laptop. Tyler had pried open the locked cabinet, probably with the spare key Sam had once entrusted to him just in case. Papers lay scattered everywhere. Property deeds, contracts, even the old leather ledger Sam kept as a reminder of the company's early debts and triumphs. "What do you think you're doing?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. Tyler didn't even flinch. "Relax, Mom. We're just organizing. Dad left a mess. You wouldn't know where to start." Kelsey smirked, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her face. "We're just trying to help you, Nora. You don't want to get buried in all this financial stuff." That word, buried, landed like a knife. Sam wasn't even in the ground a full week, and they were already circling like scavengers. "I'll handle Sam's papers," I said firmly, stepping into the room. "You two have no business in here." Tyler finally looked up, his eyes flashing with irritation, not guilt. "Mom, come on. You've never dealt with this side of things. Dad and I talked about succession. He wanted me to take over. You don't get how big this is. Ellison Modular, the rental properties, the accounts. It's not something you can manage on your own." I wanted to scream. 30 years by Sam's side, sitting through board meetings, balancing payroll crises, calling clients when Sam lost his voice. And my own son had the gall to tell me I wouldn't understand. "You'll get your chance at the will reading," I said, voice trembling from fury more than fear. "Until then, close that drawer." Kelsey hopped off the desk, her tone syrupy, but her eyes gleaming. "Of course, Nora. We'll let the lawyers sort it out. But don't say we didn't offer to take the burden off your shoulders." They left the study, but not before Tyler muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. "Don't expect a dime, Mom. You've had your time. Now it's ours." I stood in the wreckage of Sam's papers, clutching the edge of the desk to steady myself. My hands shook not from weakness, but from the sheer insult of it all. My own flesh and blood had reduced me to a placeholder, a stepping stone to money he thought was already his. Later that night, I sat on the porch swing, the same one Sam and I painted red decades ago, listening to the waves slap against the rocks. I remembered Tyler as a boy running barefoot down the dock, yelling that he'd be just like Dad when he grew up. Back then, he wanted to build things, not tear people down. Where had that boy gone? The scarf slipped from my shoulders into my lap, and I pressed the fabric to my face. The scent of Sam still clung to it, salt sawdust and the faint cologne he never abandoned. I wept quietly, not just for the husband I'd lost, but for the son who seemed to have vanished into greed. The next morning, Kelsey made it worse. I found her in the kitchen on the phone with someone. Her voice was low, but the words carried. "Yes, the house is in her name right now, but that won't last. We'll have it listed by Christmas." She laughed lightly, the way you do when you think the world is already in your pocket. She didn't know I was standing in the doorway. When she hung up, I asked, "Who are you talking to?" She blinked, then pasted on a fake smile. "Oh, just a realtor friend, exploring options. You know how big this place is. Way too much for you alone." I stared at her, the morning light cutting sharp angles across her carefully powdered face. This is my home, Kelsey. The walls, the floors, the swing outside, Sam and I built our life here. Don't you ever talk about selling it again? For a moment, I thought she might apologize, but instead, she tilted her head, voice dripping with condescension. Nora, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Tyler's only thinking of you. He doesn't want you overwhelmed. You'll thank us later. She brushed past me, leaving the faint scent of expensive perfume and entitlement. That was the moment something hardened in me. Grief was still there, gnawing like an old dog at my ribs. But it was no longer the whole of me. Anger had arrived, steady and clarifying. Sam's scarf was still wrapped around my shoulders, warm, despite the chill seeping in from the sea. I touched the fabric and thought of the blue folder in the drawer. Sam had known this might happen. He'd planned for it. And if Tyler and Kelsey thought I would simply fade into the background, they were about to learn what it meant when a woman who had spent her life underestimated finally decided she was done being quiet. The morning after Kelsey's smug phone call, I woke before the sun. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your chest until you can barely breathe. For a moment, I thought about staying in bed, pulling the quilt over my head, and letting the world carry on without me. But then I remembered Tyler's words. Don't expect a dime, Mom. The fury rose again, steady and hot. No, I wasn't going to stay buried under grief and let them dismantle everything Sam and I had built. I slipped into the study, Sam's study still messy from Tyler's intrusion. I set about restoring order. Each paper I stacked, each drawer I closed, was like stitching up a wound. And there in the locked drawer that Tyler hadn't found was the blue folder Sam had left for me. My hands trembled as I pulled it out, the paper edges rough against my fingertips. Inside was a single letter, written in Sam's blocky handwriting. Nora, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you in person. I know Tyler has changed, and Kelsey only feeds the worst in him. I've seen the way they look at you, as if you're in the way. Don't worry. I've made arrangements with David Grant. He knows everything. Trust him, and trust yourself. You are stronger than you think. Love, Sam. I sat there for a long time, tears falling silently onto the page. David Grant. The name wasn't new. He'd been Sam's lawyer for almost 20 years, a quiet, sharp man with a way of remembering every detail others overlooked. Sam used to joke that David knew more about our finances than we did. By mid-morning, I was sitting in David's office downtown. He greeted me with the kind of warmth that doesn't need to be spoken, just felt in the firmness of a handshake and the steadiness of his gaze. Nora, he said, guiding me into a leather chair. Sam prepared me for this. I'm glad you came. Hearing those words, a knot in my chest loosened. He really thought of everything, didn't he? David nodded. Your husband was meticulous. He knew Tyler might try to take control. That's why the actual will is ironclad. Tyler and Kelsey may believe they're entitled, but Sam ensured you are protected. For the first time since Sam's death, I allowed myself to exhale. Then why do I still feel like I'm drowning? Because you've been underestimated, David said simply. By your son, by your daughter-in-law, maybe even by yourself. But Nora, I've seen the paperwork. Sam left the company, the properties, and the accounts directly in your name. You hold the reins, not them. The question is, what do you want to do with that power? His words struck deep. What did I want? Revenge, justice, peace. Maybe all of them. I left David's office with copies of key documents tucked safely in my purse. As I walked through the crisp autumn air, the city humming around me, I realized something important. Grief had made me quiet, but anger had given me clarity. Sam had trusted me to protect what we built. I couldn't let his faith go to waste. That night, Tyler and Kelsey showed up unannounced. Tyler wore the confident smile of a man convinced the world was already his. Kelsey carried a bottle of wine, as if that gesture could mask the calculation in her eyes. Mom Tyler began sliding into the chair across from me at the dining table. "We've been thinking. It's time to put some plans in motion. Dad wouldn't want everything just sitting there." I let them talk. About investment opportunities, about selling unused assets, like the lake house, about how they could protect me from making costly mistakes. Their words washed over me, a performance rehearsed in whispers when they thought I wasn't listening. And for the first time, I didn't interrupt. I just smiled faintly, nodded at the right places, and let them believe I was the frail widow they imagined. Because Sam had been right sometimes. The most dangerous opponent is the one who smiles while planning your destruction. After they left, I went back to the porch swing. The sea breeze was sharp, carrying the scent of salt and pine. I wrapped Sam's scarf tighter around my shoulders and whispered, "I'm not done, Sam. Not by a long shot." In that moment, the plan began to form. I would let Tyler and Kelsey talk themselves into arrogance. I would let them underestimate me until the will reading, when the truth would slice through their illusions like a storm through glass. And in the meantime, I would quietly gather every piece of evidence of their entitlement, their words, their actions, their schemes, to remind them later that I hadn't just been watching. I'd been keeping score. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Not because the pain had gone, it hadn't, but because I finally had a direction. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about dignity, about teaching my son that family loyalty meant more than dollar signs. And if he wasn't willing to learn that lesson, then I would make sure the world taught it to him. 3 days after my meeting with David Grant, the storm I'd been expecting finally broke. It started with a phone call from Margaret, my oldest friend and neighbor for more than 30 years. Her voice was hushed, uncertain. "Nora, I just came from the grocery store and I overheard something. Tyler's been talking in town. He's saying you're not fit to handle the estate, that you're too emotional, too fragile." Fragile. The word stung worse than a slap. Tyler knew exactly where to aim at my pride, my independence, the parts of me that Sam had always admired. "I thought you should know," Margaret added gently. "People listen to him. He's Sam's son, after all." After I hung up, I sat for a long time in the kitchen, the tick of the old wall clock sounding like a countdown. Tyler wasn't just planning to manipulate me in private. He was planting seeds in the community, reshaping the narrative before the will was even read. That evening, I attended the monthly church supper, something Sam and I never missed. Normally, the smell of pot roast and baked rolls would comfort me. But as I walked in, I felt the shift in the room. People offered sympathetic smiles, but their eyes flickered, hesitant, curious, maybe even doubtful. I caught snippets of whispers. "She looks tired. Can she really manage all that money? Tyler says the business needs fresh leadership." The weight of their judgment pressed down harder than grief itself. For a moment, I wanted to shout, to tell them I wasn't weak, that Sam had trusted me. Instead, I picked up a plate, smiled, and carried on. Because that's what strength looked like, not denial, but composure under fire. The next blow came from the financial side. David called me 2 mornings later, his tone clipped. "Nora, I just received notice Tyler has been in contact with one of the banks. He tried to transfer funds from the business account, claiming he had authority as Sam's heir." My stomach dropped. "But he doesn't. Not legally." "Exactly. The bank flagged it, but this creates complications. He's pushing hard, Nora. He's acting as if he's already in control." "What do we do?" "For now, nothing. The documents are airtight, but he's creating noise confusion. If he convinces enough people you're incapable, he could force hearings delays, challenges. That's his strategy. Wear you down." I pressed the phone to my ear, forcing myself to stay calm. Then we'll make sure he underestimates me a little longer. That afternoon, Tyler and Kelsey arrived at my door without warning. This time, they didn't bring wine. They brought pressure. Mom Tyler began his voice carrying that false concern I'd learned to recognize. We've been talking with some advisors. It's clear you're overwhelmed. Managing Dad's estate is complicated. You shouldn't have to carry that burden alone. I kept my expression neutral. And what exactly are you suggesting? That we establish joint control. For your protection, Kelsey cut in smoothly. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. We can set up a trust with Tyler as co-executor. That way, you won't make mistakes in your grief. There it was, their power grab wrapped in velvet words. I appreciate your concern, I said softly. But Sam made arrangements. We'll follow them. Tyler's jaw tightened. Mom, you don't understand how dangerous this could be. Taxes, investments, business operations, these aren't things you can just guess at. Dad wouldn't want you to ruin everything he built. The cruelty of that jab nearly broke me. For a flicker of a moment, I saw my little boy, the one who used to hold my hand at baseball games, replaced by a man who saw me as an obstacle. But I didn't flinch. Your father trusted me, I replied, and I intend to honor that. The tension didn't end there. The very next day, I received a letter in the mail from a law firm not David's, a thinly veiled warning that Tyler might contest the will. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper, the legal jargon heavy as chains. Margaret found me later on the porch staring at it. They won't stop, will they? She asked. No, I admitted, but neither will I. Her eyes softened. Then let me help. Whatever you need, errands, phone calls, even just sitting with you at meetings, I'll be there. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't entirely alone. Still, the pressure mounted. At night, the house echoed with memories, but also with doubts. What if Tyler was right? What if I wasn't strong enough? What if Sam had overestimated me? One sleepless night, I pulled down the old family photo album. There was Tyler at 12, grinning with braces holding a fishing pole beside Sam at the lake. There he was, at 18 proud, in his graduation gown, my arm looped through his. I traced those images with my fingertips, tears burning. Where had that boy gone? I whispered into the empty room, Sam, I don't know if I can do this. But then I remembered Sam's letter, you are stronger than you think. The words became a lifeline. The next Sunday, Tyler cornered me outside church. His voice was low, but seething. If you keep resisting, Mom, you're going to lose everything. And when that happens, don't expect me to pick up the pieces. I looked him in the eye, steady and clear. I don't expect you to, Tyler. I never have. His face flushed with anger. Kelsey tugged his arm, muttering something sharp. They stormed off their polished heels, clicking against the pavement. As I stood there, the autumn wind swirling leaves around my feet, I realized the truth. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. And if I wanted to survive it, I would need more than quiet resolve. I would need strategy. Because Tyler and Kelsey weren't just trying to claim Sam's legacy. They were trying to erase mine. And I wasn't going to let them. Friday morning arrived gray and damp, as if the sky itself understood the weight of what was coming. I dressed carefully in a dark navy suit Sam had once said made me look unstoppable. My hands shook slightly as I fastened the pearl earrings he'd given me on our 25th anniversary. But when I caught my reflection in the mirror, I didn't see fragility. I saw a woman ready to end the performance. By 10 a.m., I was seated in the polished oak conference room of David Grant's law office. The rain tapped steadily against the tall windows, a quiet drumbeat beneath the tension. Tyler and Kelsey swept in moments later, hand in hand, dressed like they were attending a coronation. Tyler in a tailored charcoal suit, Kelsey in a cream dress with gold jewelry that screamed money already spent. Mom Tyler said warmly, almost patronizing. You look, well enough, I replied. Kelsey gave me that rehearsed smile of hers, the kind meant for cameras and country club brunches. "We're just here to support you through all of this." I said nothing, because the moment had arrived, the one Sam had orchestrated and the one they never saw coming. David cleared his throat and began. His voice carried the calm authority of a man who had seen more family battles than he cared to count. "This is the last will and testament of Samuel Whitaker, executed on August 12th of this year." Kelsey's nails clicked against the mahogany table as she leaned forward, hungry for confirmation of what she believed was hers. Tyler's jaw tightened, barely concealing anticipation. David read aloud, first to my beloved wife Nora Whitaker, who has been my partner, my confidant, and my greatest strength for 34 years. I leave the entirety of my estate, our home, all financial accounts, investments, and the controlling interest in Whitaker Construction. The words fell like a hammer. Kelsey froze mid-smile, her lips twitching in disbelief. Tyler blinked once, then again, as though he hadn't heard correctly. "All of it," Tyler finally stammered. David raised an eyebrow. "All of it?" I sat still, my hands folded neatly in my lap, though inside my heart pounded like thunder. David continued, "To my son, Tyler Whitaker, I leave the sum of $1 as a reminder that respect must be earned, not expected." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Then Tyler exploded. $1. His voice cracked like glass. That's a joke. He wouldn't do that." "Mom." He turned to me, his face red with fury. Tell him this isn't real." I looked at him with all the calm I could muster. "It's real, Tyler. Your father knew exactly what he was doing." Kelsey was quicker to recover, her sharp instincts kicking in. She leaned toward David. "This is invalid. He was sick, not thinking clearly. My husband is his rightful heir." David slid a thick folder across the table. "Mr. Whitaker underwent a full psychological evaluation 1 week before signing this document. Certified proof of sound mind. In addition, Mr. Whitaker compiled extensive documentation of his concerns about your entitlement and treatment of Nora." He opened the folder. Inside were transcripts, bank records, even audio recordings. My breath caught when I heard Sam's voice through the tiny speaker as David pressed play. Recording. "Tyler has begun speaking of my death as though it's a business plan. He assumes his inheritance as entitlement and, with Kelsey's encouragement, has attempted to pressure Nora. I cannot and will not allow greed to erode what I built with love." Tyler's face went pale. Kelsey's hand shot out to stop the recording, but David continued, unflinching. "There are also emails, witnesses, and financial contracts signed by Tyler in anticipation of funds he did not yet have. This will is airtight. Contesting it would only make these records public." I turned to my son. Sam was watching. Every word, every choice. He saw who you became. Tyler slammed his fists on the table. "You don't get it. I am Whitaker Construction. I worked there my whole life. That company is mine." I stood slowly, steadying myself. "No, Tyler. You worked for your father. And now, if you want a future there, you'll work for me." His mouth opened, then closed as the reality sank in. Kelsey's mask finally shattered. "This is insane. You're going to let a grieving widow run a multi-million-dollar company? She'll ruin it. She's weak. I cut her off with a quiet ferocity I didn't know I still possessed. "Careful, Kelsey. The only thing Sam left you is the chance to reveal your true character. And you're doing a fine job." The room went silent again. Even David seemed to pause, watching the battle lines redraw themselves. Tyler's voice broke, almost pleading. "Mom, you can fix this. You can give me what's mine. Please. Don't let Dad's decision destroy me." For a moment, my heart cracked. I saw the little boy who used to climb into Sam's pickup truck, his face smeared with dirt from the baseball field. But then I remembered his voice at the funeral. She's been living off Dad's success. Now it's our turn. I met his gaze. This isn't destruction, Tyler. This is consequence. And whether you learn from it or not, that's up to you. Kelsey shot to her feet, fury blazing. We'll fight this. You'll regret humiliating us. David calmly stacked the papers. You're welcome to try. But remember, every challenge you bring will open these records to the public. Do you really want your investors, your friends, this entire town, to hear exactly what Sam recorded? The color drained from Kelsey's face. I walked toward the window, looking out at the rain streaking down the glass. For the first time since Sam's death, I felt air in my lungs steady and sure. I turned back to them. Sam trusted me. He left me everything because he knew I wouldn't squander it. He also left you both something, just not what you expected. He left you the chance to decide who you want to be without his fortune propping you up. Tyler sank back into his chair, his body heavy, defeated. Kelsey clutched her designer purse like a lifeline, her eyes darting, searching for an exit. The will was read. The truth was out. And for once, I wasn't the one underestimated. The rain that had hammered the windows during the will reading seemed to follow us all home. By the next morning, word was spreading faster than fire in dry brush. In a town like ours, secrets never stayed buried, especially not a $12 million estate scandal wrapped in betrayal and humiliation. At the grocery store, I overheard whispers. Did you hear Sam left everything to Nora and Tyler? Just $1. Imagine that. Guess his wife's fancy handbags won't pay the bills now. I pretended not to hear, but inside I knew this was part of Sam's plan. Tyler and Kelsey weren't just stripped of money. They were stripped of the illusion that their greed went unnoticed. Within days, the consequences began to unfold. Tyler's business partners, the ones who'd been circling Whitaker Construction like vultures, quietly pulled away. They'd expected him to inherit controlling interest to bring new deals to the table. When they learned he owned nothing, their calls stopped. Meetings vanished from his calendar. He had gambled on a fortune he never had, and now he stood with empty hands. Kelsey fared no better. The boutique owner downtown called me discreetly, her voice equal parts amused and pitying. Nora, I thought you should know. Kelsey ordered nearly $50,000 worth of clothing and jewelry last month. She insisted Tyler was about to inherit millions. Now, the invoices are past due. Debt collectors began circling. The luxury SUV Kelsey paraded around town was repossessed in front of the club, her voice shrill as she argued with the tow truck driver. The humiliation was public, loud, and unforgettable. And then came the most bitter cut, their so-called friends. The same couples who once clinked champagne glasses with them at fundraisers now avoided their calls. No one wanted to be associated with the couple who had been publicly exposed as entitled frauds. Kelsey, who had built her identity on appearances, crumbled under the weight of lost status. I heard from Margaret, a woman on the charity board with me, that Kelsey had cornered her in the restroom at the country club. She begged me to tell everyone Sam wasn't in his right mind, Margaret said, shaking her head. But we all know the truth, Nora. Sam was sharp until the day he died. The more she denies it, the more foolish she looks. Kelsey's last attempt to save face ended in disaster. She filed for divorce. The court documents leaked to the local paper painted Tyler as irresponsible and manipulative, claiming she had been misled about his financial future. The irony was almost too much to bear. Meanwhile, Tyler unraveled in quieter but no less devastating ways. One evening, he showed up at my porch. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead. His eyes were hollow, bloodshot. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They're suing me. The real estate firm, the restaurant franchise, everyone. They want deposits I can't pay. I don't know what to do." My instinct was to gather him into my arms, to shield him like I had when he was a little boy with scraped knees. But I stood still, because love wasn't the same as rescue, and Sam's letter had burned those words into my heart. "You lied, Tyler," I said softly. "You signed papers on money you never had. This is the cost of greed." He dropped his head into his hands. "Dad ruined me."
"No," I said, my voice steady. "You ruined yourself. Dad gave you a lesson. What you do with it is up to you."
The silence between us was thick with 38 years of love and disappointment. Then, without another word, he walked back into the rain. And me, I had my own reckonings to face. Taking over Whitaker Construction wasn't as simple as signing papers. Suddenly, I was in boardrooms Sam used to command men twice my age, watching me with thinly veiled skepticism. One of them leaned across the table in our first meeting and said, "Mrs. Whitaker, with all due respect, running this company isn't a job for someone inexperienced." I looked him square in the eye. I was by Sam's side for every deal he ever made. I opened doors with my relationships when your handshakes wouldn't do. Don't confuse quiet support with ignorance. By the end of that meeting, even the doubters sat straighter, taking notes as I laid out a plan Sam and I had discussed for years, but never had the chance to implement. The company wasn't just surviving, it was evolving. Yet victory was not without cost. Some nights, when the house was too quiet and Sam's absence too sharp, I'd sit by the fireplace clutching his last letter. His words gave me strength, but they also reminded me of the line we had drawn in the sand with our own son. Was it worth it, watching Tyler stumble, knowing he was drowning in mistakes? Every mother's heart says no. But every part of me that had been dismissed, belittled, underestimated, whispered yes. It was the only way for him to learn. The ripple effect in town was undeniable. People who once treated me as a background figure suddenly saw me differently. The woman who had walked into the funeral in a simple black dress, quiet and overlooked, was now the sole heir of Sam Whitaker's empire. Some looked at me with respect, some with envy, and some, like Tyler, looked with pure resentment. But I no longer flinched under those gazes. I had survived the storm. The final humiliation came when Tyler and Kelsey's marriage dissolved publicly. She left town for her sister's house in Florida, her reputation in tatters. Tyler stayed stripped of everything but his name, and even that seemed heavy now. Neighbors whispered about how he'd lost it all. Kids at the high school, cruel in their teenage bluntness, joked that Tyler Whitaker inherited $1. And though my heart ached for him, I also knew this sometimes pain is the only teacher strong enough to reach us. Sam had trusted me with the burden of being both protector and judge. And as I stood in our kitchen pouring a glass of his favorite bourbon, I realized I was no longer just living out Sam's plan. I was shaping my own. 3 months after the will reading, the storm had finally passed. Not that life was suddenly easy, but the noise had quieted. The gossip faded into the background, the lawsuits and headlines lost their shine. What lingered wasn't chaos, it was clarity. I had survived humiliation, betrayal, and the burden of carrying Sam's last plan. And somehow, standing at the edge of it all, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. The mornings were mine again. I would sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee watching sunlight spill across the hardwood Sam and I had chosen 30 years ago. The house felt different now, not haunted by absence, but filled with presence. Every painting on the wall, every scuff on the banister, every laugh frozen in a photo frame reminded me that I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost Sam, but I still had myself. And myself was stronger than I had ever imagined. The company, too, began to reflect that strength. Under my guidance, Whitaker Construction shifted its focus. No more endless luxury condos for people who saw homes as trophies. We turned toward affordable housing projects, community center schools. Work that mattered. Work Sam and I had always talked about doing once we were comfortable. At our first groundbreaking ceremony, I stood on the dirt lot with a hard hat perched awkwardly on my hair and felt Sam's presence like a hand on my shoulder. Tyler should have been there beside me carrying his father's name forward, but he wasn't. That absence hurt, but it also freed me to build without compromise. As for Tyler, word reached me in fragments. He had moved into a small apartment above the hardware store downtown. No more country club, no more imported cars, no more glossy dinners with people who only wanted access to his inheritance. Instead, he was working construction jobs, the kind that left his hands calloused and his clothes covered in dust. Sometimes passing the work sites on my way into the office, I'd catch a glimpse of him. He didn't see me, or maybe he pretended not to. But I watched him lift beams, haul bricks, wipe sweat from his brow. For the first time in years, he looked like a man building something real. And Kelsey, she left town for Florida, chasing a life that no longer existed. Her name became a cautionary tale, whispered in nail salons and church parking lots, the woman who married a fortune that never came. Part of me pitied her. Another part knew she had shown her true face long before the will exposed her. And pity was all I had left to give. But the real change was inside me. Before I had been content to stand in Sam's shadow, the loyal wife, the gracious hostess, the one who smoothed the rough edges while he built empires. After his death, everyone expected me to fold to let Tyler and Kelsey handle things, to fade quietly into widowhood. Instead, I had become something no one saw coming, the woman who carried Sam's legacy with her own hands, who stood at the center of her own story. I wasn't just the widow. I was Nora Whitaker, businesswoman, leader, mother. One quiet evening, I found myself sitting by the fireplace with Sam's final letter in my lap. His handwriting, careful and firm, had become my compass. Don't let grief make you forget your worth. Don't let entitlement steal what we built. You are stronger than even you know. For the first time, I didn't cry when I read it. I smiled, because I finally believed him. Do I miss Tyler? Every day. No matter what he's done, he's still my son. But now, love looks different. It doesn't mean shielding him from pain or bailing him out of trouble. It means letting him walk his own road, even if that road is rougher than I'd ever wish for him. The last time I saw him up close, it was at the diner on Main Street. He was sitting alone, a plate of scrambled eggs in front of him, his hands rough and stained with work. He looked tired, older, but there was a steadiness in his eyes I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Our eyes met briefly. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, like a man acknowledging a truth he wasn't ready to say aloud. And for now, that was enough.
So here I am.
At 61, I'm not the woman I thought I'd be. I'm stronger, sharper, and perhaps a little lonelier. But I've also learned the difference between enabling and empowering, between family as an excuse and family as a choice.
Sam used to say, legacies aren't built by money. They're built by how you carry yourself when the storms come. The storm came. It tore through my house, my family, my heart. But when it passed, I was still standing. And now I know storms don't just destroy. Sometimes they clear the sky so you can finally see. At the heart of this story lies a lesson many of us learned too late. Money may shape opportunities, but character shapes destiny. When family ties are tested by greed, betrayal, or the hunger for control, it's not the size of an inheritance that matters, it's the values we leave behind. Nora's journey reminds us that love without respect becomes a burden, and respect without accountability is meaningless. True legacy is not measured in dollars, but in dignity, resilience, and the courage to set boundaries, even with those we love most. For parents and grandparents, the message is clear. Protecting your worth does not mean turning your back on family. It means teaching them the responsibility that comes with privilege. For children, it is a reminder
that entitlement destroys relationships faster than poverty ever could, and that trust once broken is earned back only through consistent actions, not promises. Perhaps you've faced moments when your own love was mistaken for weakness, when your years of sacrifice were dismissed as just what parents do. This story is a call to stand tall, to remember your wisdom has value, and to demand the respect you deserve. And for anyone who has been underestimated, know that your strength grows sharpest in the storms you survive. If this message touched your heart, I invite you to share your thoughts below, subscribe for more stories that matter, and pass this video to someone who might need the reminder today. Wishing you peace, strength, and the quiet joy of knowing your worth always.